April 15th, 2007. It was a crisp spring morning in Maple Ridge, a quiet Ohio suburb. The sun had just begun to cast golden rays over rows of neat houses, each one nearly identical white picket fences, freshly mowed lawns, and tidy flower beds. Beneath this picture-perfect tranquility, however, lay secrets that would soon unravel in tragedy. Karen Miller stood in her sunlit kitchen sipping coffee from her favorite blue ceramic mug. Her auburn hair was tied in a loose bun, and her floral apron hung neatly over her modest sweater and jeans. To anyone peering in, she looked like the embodiment of suburban bliss. But her eyes, tinged with weariness, betrayed a different story. Karen's life was routine, predictable, and dull. Married to Tom, a successful financial advisor, and raising their 8-year-old son, Billy, she should have felt content. But as the years had passed, she'd grown restless, yearning for something more. Her gaze drifted out the window to the house next door, where the Wallaces had moved in 2 months ago. The Wallace family had brought a liveliness to the neighborhood. Rick Wallace was a jovial traveling salesman. His wife, Linda, a yoga instructor. Their daughter, Emma, however, was different, quiet, and introspective, always sketching in her notebook under the sprawling oak tree in their backyard. Karen had noticed Emma almost immediately. The girl had a certain magnetism, a quiet sadness that Karen couldn't ignore. It reminded her of herself at that age, yearning for connection and understanding. Their first interaction came one Saturday afternoon. Karen had been watering her rose bushes when Emma's voice startled her. "Your garden is beautiful," Emma said, leaning over the fence. Karen turned and smiled. "Thank you. Would you like to come over and see it?" That afternoon, they sat in Karen's backyard talking for hours. Emma sketched the roses while Karen pruned the bushes. Their conversation started light: school, hobbies, Emma's love of art. But soon it delved deeper. Emma confided her frustrations with her parents, who didn't understand her passion for art or her struggles with fitting in. Karen listened intently, offering advice and comfort. Over the following weeks, Emma began spending more time at Karen's house. They baked cookies, watched old movies, and discussed books. To Linda and Rick, it seemed harmless, a neighborly bond. Tom, often away for work, hardly noticed Emma's presence. But for Karen and Emma, their connection was evolving into something neither could fully understand. One evening, as they sat on the porch beneath a sky full of stars, Emma turned to Karen, her voice trembling. "Karen, you make me feel like I matter," Emma whispered. Karen felt a wave of emotion she hadn't expected. Without thinking, she reached out and brushed a strand of hair from Emma's face. Their eyes locked. For a moment, the world stood still. Then cautiously, they leaned toward each other. The kiss was brief, tentative, and electric. They pulled away, both startled by what had just happened. Emma's cheeks flushed pink, and Karen's heart raced. They didn't speak of it, but the unspoken understanding between them grew stronger with each passing day. By April, their encounters had become more secretive. Karen found herself longing for Emma's presence, savoring every stolen moment. But she also knew the danger. Emma was still a teenager, and their relationship was forbidden on every level. One evening, Karen's husband, Tom, arrived home earlier than expected. Karen and Emma were in the kitchen, their laughter filling the air. The moment Tom walked in, the atmosphere shifted. He glanced between them, suspicion flickering across his face. "What's going on?" Tom asked, his tone casual but edged with something darker. "Just baking cookies," Karen replied quickly, her voice too cheerful. Tom's eyes lingered on Emma for a moment before he shrugged it off. But Karen could feel the tension building. Karen knew she was playing with fire, but she couldn't stop. The pull toward Emma was too strong, too consuming. Yet, in the back of her mind, a gnawing fear grew. How long could they keep their secret before it all came crashing down? As Karen lay in bed that night beside her sleeping husband, her mind raced. She knew the path she was on would lead to disaster. What she didn't know was how soon that disaster would strike and just how devastating it would be. May 2007. The days turned into weeks, and Karen's secret connection with Emma deepened. Every stolen glance, every whispered word, and every touch carried a weight that neither could ignore. But what had started as an innocent bond now burned with a dangerous intensity, one that threatened to consume them both. Karen had become adept at hiding the affair. She meticulously planned their encounters around Tom's business trips and Billy's school schedule. Emma, too, became a master of deceit, making excuses to her parents about study groups or late-night art projects. But the more they tried to conceal their relationship, the more the cracks began to show. One Friday evening, Karen found herself staring out the window as Tom packed his suitcase for yet another business trip. He had been unusually distant lately, his demeanor cold and suspicious. Karen brushed it off as work stress, but deep down she knew he sensed something was wrong. "Karen," Tom said, breaking the silence, "is there something you're not telling me?" Karen froze, her heart pounding. "What do you mean?" Tom shrugged, zipping up his suitcase. "You've been different lately, distant. I just want to make sure everything's okay." Karen forced a smile. "I'm fine, Tom. Really." But Tom's piercing gaze lingered on her for a moment before he nodded and left the room. That same evening, as soon as Tom's car disappeared down the street, Emma slipped through the back door. Karen greeted her with a nervous smile, her hands trembling as she poured them glasses of wine. Emma noticed. "What's wrong?" Emma asked, her voice soft but concerned. "Tom's suspicious," Karen admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up." Emma reached out, placing her hand over Karen's. "We'll figure it out. I'm not letting you go." But the walls were closing in. Linda Wallace had begun to notice Emma's absences and her sudden secrecy. One afternoon, while Karen was grocery shopping, Linda knocked on the Miller's door. Tom answered, surprised to see his neighbor standing on the porch. "Hey, Linda, everything okay?" Linda hesitated, glancing over her shoulder before speaking. "I just wanted to ask, has Emma been spending a lot of time here lately? She's been acting strange, and I can't put my finger on it." Tom frowned. "She's been here a few times." "Why?" Linda sighed, her brow furrowed. "I don't know. Something feels off. She's been distant, and I think she's hiding something." Tom's mind raced. Could this be the reason for Karen's strange behavior? He decided to keep a closer eye on her. That night, Tom canceled his trip, claiming he had an urgent project to finish at home. Karen's heart sank when he walked through the door. She quickly texted Emma to cancel their plans, but the disappointment on the girl's face when she read the message haunted her. Over the next few days, Tom's presence in the house was suffocating. He watched Karen closely, his questions becoming more pointed. Karen felt like a prisoner in her own home, her every move scrutinized. Meanwhile, Emma was growing increasingly frustrated. She hated sneaking around, and the thought of losing Karen terrified her. One evening, as they spoke in hushed tones on the phone, Emma made a bold suggestion. "What if we just left?" she whispered. "Emma, we can't," Karen replied, her voice breaking. "I have Billy. And Tom, he'll never let me go." "Then what do we do?" Emma asked, her voice rising with desperation. "I can't keep pretending everything's fine. I need you, Karen." Karen's chest tightened. She didn't have an answer. The tension finally came to a head one fateful afternoon. Karen and Emma had managed to sneak away for a few hours while Tom was at a meeting. They sat in Karen's car, parked at the edge of a secluded park. "I can't keep doing this," Karen said, tears streaming down her face. "It's tearing me apart." Emma grabbed her hand, her grip firm. "Then let's make a plan. We'll figure it out together." As they embraced, neither noticed the figure standing in the shadows watching. Karen didn't know it yet, but her world was about to implode. The secret she had worked so hard to protect was on the verge of being exposed, and the consequences would be catastrophic. As Karen drove Emma home that evening, her hands shook on the steering wheel. She felt the weight of her choices pressing down on her, but the worst was yet to come. A storm was brewing, and it was about to engulf them all. June 2007. By early summer, the tension in Maple Ridge had reached a boiling point. The once quiet suburb seemed to hum with unspoken suspicions and hushed conversations. Karen felt the walls of her carefully constructed life crumbling, each day more suffocating than the last. Tom had grown increasingly distant, his penetrating gaze making Karen's stomach churn with guilt. Linda Wallace had started keeping a closer watch on Emma, her questions becoming more pointed. And Karen herself was racked with a mix of longing and fear that left her sleepless most nights. The final straw came one evening when Karen arrived home from running errands. Tom was waiting for her in the living room, his face grim. In his hand, he held Karen's cell phone. "Who's Emma?" he asked, his voice cold and clipped. Karen's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" Tom held up the phone, scrolling through a series of messages Karen hadn't deleted. They were innocent enough on the surface discussions about books, art, and shared secrets, but their tone was unmistakable. "I don't know what this is," Tom said, his voice trembling with barely contained anger. "But it's not normal." Karen scrambled for a response. "She's just a friend, Tom. She's going through a rough time, and I've been helping her." Tom's jaw clenched, his knuckles white as he gripped the phone. "A friend? Karen, she's 17. What the hell is going on?" Karen couldn't meet his eyes. The argument that followed was explosive. Karen insisted there was nothing inappropriate, but Tom wasn't convinced. He threatened to call Emma's parents, to confront them about what was happening. Karen pleaded with him to let it go, but the damage was done. Tom's trust was shattered, and Karen knew her life was spiraling out of control. Meanwhile, Emma was facing her own challenges. Linda had grown increasingly suspicious of her daughter's erratic behavior. She began checking Emma's phone and questioning her whereabouts. Emma, feeling cornered, lashed out. Their once warm relationship had become a battleground of shouting matches and slammed doors. One night, after another heated argument with her mother, Emma showed up at Karen's house unannounced. Her eyes were red from crying, her hands trembling as she rang the doorbell. Karen opened the door and immediately pulled Emma inside. "What happened?" she asked, guiding the girl to the couch. "She knows something's up," Emma said between sobs. "She won't stop asking questions. I can't take it anymore." Karen sat beside her, wrapping her arms around the trembling teenager. "It's going to be okay," she whispered, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. But as they sat there, Karen realized they were out of options. Tom's discovery and Linda's suspicions meant their secret couldn't remain hidden much longer. Karen and Emma's connection, once thrilling and intoxicating, had become a ticking time bomb. "We need to figure out what to do," Emma said, her voice shaky but resolute. "We can't keep living like this." Karen nodded, her mind racing. She knew Emma was right, but the solution they needed would come at a devastating cost. The next day, Karen tried to return to normalcy, but the tension was palpable. Tom's cold stares and clipped responses left her on edge, and Billy seemed to sense the unease, clinging to his mother more than usual. Karen couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to come crashing down. That evening, Karen received a frantic phone call from Emma. "I need to see you," Emma said, her voice trembling. "It's urgent." Karen hesitated. Tom was home and his suspicion hadn't waned. But Emma sounded desperate, and Karen couldn't refuse her. "Meet me at the park," Karen whispered, glancing over her shoulder to make sure Tom wasn't listening. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Karen and Emma sat on the park bench, their voices hushed as they discussed their next steps. Emma's fear was palpable. She couldn't go back home, not with her mother breathing down her neck. Karen felt equally trapped, her marriage hanging by a thread and her secret life teetering on the edge of exposure. "We could just leave," Emma said, her voice trembling. "Start over somewhere new." Karen shook her head. "It's not that simple. I have Billy. I can't just abandon him." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Then what are we supposed to do?" "I can't lose you." Karen didn't have an answer. But as they sat there in the growing darkness, a shadow moved in the distance, a figure watching them, unseen by either woman. The storm they had tried so hard to avoid was finally here. Karen and Emma left the park, unaware that their every move had been observed. The next 48 hours would change their lives forever, and the quiet streets of Maple Ridge would never be the same. June 22nd, 2007. The evening air in Maple Ridge was heavy, thick with the oppressive weight of an approaching summer storm. The events of the past few weeks had spiraled out of control, leaving Karen Miller feeling like a caged animal, trapped by her secrets and her choices. Tom's suspicion had grown into something far more menacing. He had started staying home, keeping a watchful eye on Karen, questioning her every move. That Friday night, Karen found herself standing in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she chopped vegetables for dinner. Tom sat at the dining table, his eyes boring into her as though he could read her thoughts. The sound of the front door opening startled Karen. Emma had shown up despite Karen's warnings to stay away. Karen's heart sank as Tom rose from his chair, his expression darkening. "What's she doing here?" he asked, his voice low but laced with anger. Karen stammered. She just needed to talk. "Talk?" Tom repeated, stepping closer. "At this hour? Karen, I'm done playing games. What's going on between you two?" Emma, sensing the danger, tried to defuse the situation. "Mr. Miller, it's nothing." "I just shut up." Tom snapped, cutting her off. "You don't get to come into my house and lie to my face." Karen stepped between them, her voice trembling. "Tom, stop. You're scaring her. She should be scared." Tom shouted, his face red with fury. "You think I don't know what's going on? You're sick, Karen. Both of you are sick." Tom's rage boiled over. He grabbed Karen's arm, his grip bruising, and pulled her toward him. "You're ruining this family, Karen. Do you even care about Billy? About me?" Emma, terrified but defiant, tried to intervene. "Let her go," she screamed, grabbing a heavy vase from the table and hurling it at Tom. The vase shattered against his shoulder and he stumbled backward. The room erupted into chaos. Karen tried to pull Emma away, shouting for her to leave, but Emma wouldn't back down. Tom, now bleeding from a cut on his temple, lunged at Emma. In the struggle, Karen grabbed the knife from the kitchen counter. "Stop," Karen screamed, holding the knife out in front of her. "Tom, don't make me," but Tom didn't stop. He charged at Karen, his hand reaching for the blade. In the struggle, Karen's arm jerked forward, and the knife plunged into his chest. For a moment, the world went silent. Tom stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock, blood spreading rapidly across his shirt. He collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. Karen dropped the knife, her knees buckling as she fell to the floor beside Tom. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hands trembling. "What have I done?" stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. "We have to call someone," she said, her voice shaking. Karen shook her head violently. No, they'll take Billy. They'll take you. We can't." Emma hesitated, but the panic in Karen's voice was infectious. Together, they moved quickly, cleaning up the scene. They dragged Tom's body to the garage and wrapped it in a tarp, the weight of their actions sinking in with every step. The storm that had been threatening all evening finally broke. Rain pounding against the roof as Karen and Emma drove Tom's car, a remote stretch of forest outside town. They worked silently, burying his body in the rain-soaked earth. When they returned home, drenched and shivering, Karen collapsed onto the couch. She couldn't stop shaking. The image of Tom's lifeless eyes burned into her mind. As the first rays of sunlight broke over Maple Ridge, Karen realized their nightmare was far from over. The murder had been impulsive, messy, and full of loose ends. People would start asking questions, and it wouldn't be long before the truth began to unravel. Karen and Emma sat in silence, the weight of what they had done pressing down on them. The storm outside had passed, but inside the Miller home, a darker storm was just beginning to brew. July 2007. The days following Tom's murder were a blur for Karen and Emma. Each passing hour felt like walking on a tightrope, the fear of discovery gnawing at their sanity. For Karen, guilt festered like an open wound. For Emma, it was the first taste of what desperation could drive someone to do. Neither of them knew how long they could hold on. In Maple Ridge, Tom's sudden disappearance didn't go unnoticed. Karen had hastily crafted a story about him, leaving on an impromptu business trip. But the neighbors whispered, his car was gone. And Karen's shaky demeanor only fueled suspicions. Rick Wallace, Linda's husband, was the first to act. As Tom's closest acquaintance in the neighborhood, Rick called the police, reporting "Told." When officers arrived at Karen's door, she felt her heart stop. Emma, hidden in the kitchen, listened as Karen stumbled through her fabricated story. "Tom's out of town for work," Karen said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm not sure when he'll be back, but I can give you his office number." The officers nodded but seemed unconvinced. One of them handed Karen a card. "If he doesn't contact you soon, give us a call. We may need more information." Karen shut the door and slumped against it, her hands shaking. "They know," she whispered to Emma. "They'll find out." The situation escalated when Linda Wallace confided in the police about her own suspicions. Emma had been distant and evasive, and Linda had noticed bruises on her arms after the night Tom was killed. Emma, under increasing pressure from her mother, began to unravel. She became paranoid, avoiding school and snapping at Karen in frustration. One afternoon, Linda found Emma's sketchbook hidden under her bed. Flipping through the pages, she froze. Among the drawings of flowers and abstract shapes were detailed sketches of Karen and one of Tom, lying in a pool of blood. Linda confronted Emma that night, demanding to know the truth. Emma broke down, confessing everything in a flood of tears. Linda was horrified but also torn. Her maternal instincts fought against the need to report her daughter. After hours of agonizing over her decision, Linda called the police. The investigation moved quickly after Emma's confession. Police obtained a warrant to search Karen's home. Officers discovered traces of blood in the kitchen that hadn't been cleaned properly, and Tom's financial records revealed a lack of recent activity. Karen and Emma were both brought in for questioning. Karen initially tried to deny everything, but the mounting evidence made it impossible. Emma, devastated and guilt-ridden, told the police the full story, implicating herself in Karen and Tom's murder. The gruesome details stunned the small community of Maple Ridge. During the trial, Karen's defense team argued that Tom's death had been accidental, the result of self-defense during an argument. Emma's lawyers portrayed her as a manipulated, vulnerable teenager who had been drawn into an adult's twisted fantasy. The prosecution, however, painted a damning picture of their relationship, calling it predatory and immoral. The jury deliberated for 3 days. In the end, Karen was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Emma, due to her age and cooperation with the investigation, was sentenced to 10 years in a juvenile detention facility. Years later, the story of Karen and Emma still haunts Maple Ridge. Neighbors speak in hushed tones about the scandal that shattered their quiet community. Karen, now serving her sentence, writes letters to Billy, who lives with her sister. Emma, released from detention, has tried to move on, but the weight of her actions lingers. The tale of Karen Miller and Emma Wallace serves as a chilling reminder of how secrets, lies, and forbidden desires can spiral into tragedy. The once idyllic suburb of Maple Ridge would never be the same, its peace forever marred by the darkness that unfolded within its borders.